Let's begin. Raymond White had always believed in the quiet strength of patience. At 34, he'd built a life that most would consider modest, but fulfilling a career as a civil litigation attorney specializing in family law, a small but comfortable home in suburban Connecticut, and most importantly, his daughter Sophie. The 8-year-old was the center of his universe, a bright-eyed girl with his dark hair and her mother's smile, though that smile had become less frequent in recent months. His marriage to Hannah had started with promise 7 years ago. She'd been different than softer, more present. They'd met at a charity fundraiser where she was volunteering, and her warmth had drawn him in immediately. But over the years, especially after Sophie was born, something had shifted. Hannah became increasingly distant, spending more time with her family, the Hawkins clan, than with him and their daughter. At first, Raymond attributed it to postpartum struggles, then to adjustment issues. He tried counseling, tried communication, tried everything his training as an attorney had taught him about negotiation and conflict resolution. Nothing worked. The Hawkins family was old money from Greenwich, the kind that traced their lineage back to railroad barons and shipping magnates. Milton Hawkins, Hannah's father, still acted as though the family fortune was intact, though Raymond knew from careful observation that they were burning through the last of their inheritance with alarming speed. Gertrude Hawkins, the matriarch, was a woman carved from ice and entitlement, who'd made her disapproval of Raymond clear from their first meeting. A lawyer, she'd said with a sniff. How practical. The dismissal in her tone had set the precedent for every interaction that followed. Hannah's siblings were no better. Toni Hawkins, 32, had never held a job in her life, flitting from one expensive hobby to another on her parents' dwindling funds. Brian Hawkins, 28, had failed out of 3 business ventures, each time blaming everyone but himself for the collapse. They all lived within a 5-mile radius of the family estate, circling the aging matriarch and patriarch like planets around a dying star. Sophie had been born into this dysfunction, but Raymond had tried to shield her from the worst of it. She was a sensitive child, creative and kind, who loved to draw pictures of fantastical worlds where everyone was happy. She'd been excited about Christmas for months, talking about seeing Grammy and Grampy and her aunts and uncles. It broke Raymond's heart every time, because he could see what she couldn't, the barely concealed disdain in Gertrude's eyes when Sophie showed her a drawing. The way Milton would check his phone when Sophie tried to tell him about school. The forced smiles from Toni and Brian that never reached their eyes. But Raymond bit his tongue and endured it, because Hannah insisted on maintaining family ties, and he didn't want to be the reason for a rift. He'd seen too many families torn apart in his practice, too many children caught in the crossfire of adult wars. So he smiled, nodded, and played the role of the tolerated son-in-law. Everything changed on December 18th. Raymond had been working from home that afternoon, reviewing depositions for a custody case that was heading to trial in January. His phone buzzed repeatedly on his desk, a cascade of notifications that pulled his attention from the documents. He picked it up, expecting work emails, and instead found himself staring at a group chat conversation that made his blood run cold. The chat was labeled Christmas Planning and included Hannah, Gertrude, Milton, Toni, and Brian. But it wasn't discussing menu items or gift exchanges. Raymond's hands began to shake as he read through the messages, scrolling up to see the full context. Gertrude, I've had quite enough of that child's interruptions and demands for attention. Christmas should be about family, not indulging a spoiled brat. Toni, she gets worse every year. Did you see how she monopolized conversation at Thanksgiving? I couldn't get a word in. Brian, the kid's a nightmare, always showing everyone her stupid drawings like anyone cares. Hannah, I know. She's been impossible lately, always crying about wanting more time with me. Raymond's vision blurred. This was his daughter they were discussing, sweet, innocent Sophie, who just wanted to be loved by her family. Milton, perhaps it's time we taught her a lesson about proper behavior and knowing her place. Gertrude, I have an idea. What if we make this Christmas particularly memorable for her? A reality check, so to speak. Toni, I'm listening. Gertrude, we'll let her think she's getting the present she wants. I've heard her going on about that art set and the telescope. We'll wrap up boxes in pretty paper, put her name on them, make a big show of it. Brian, and then what? Gertrude, when she opens them in front of everyone, they'll be empty. Or better yet, filled with something disappointing. Old newspapers, perhaps broken toys. Raymond felt sick. Hannah, that seems harsh, even for us. Gertrude, it builds character. The girl needs to learn that the world doesn't revolve around her wants and needs. Tony, I love it. We could also make sure all the good food is served after she's sent to bed. Let her have plain pasta, or something while we have the real feast. Brian, what about activities? We could plan all the adult stuff and just exclude her. Make it clear she's not really part of the family. Milton, my wife's idea has merit. The child has become too comfortable expecting attention and affection. This will teach her humility. Hannah, make sure her father has no idea. Raymond would lose his mind if he knew. He's overly protective as it is. Gertrude, Raymond won't suspect a thing. He's too busy trying to fit in with us to notice what's really happening. We'll be sweet to his face, and he'll never know the difference. Tony, this is going to be hilarious. I can't wait to see her little face when she realizes all the presents are fake. Brian, someone should film it. The meltdown will be epic. Hannah, just make sure we're subtle about the planning. And someone needs to make sure Raymond's occupied when we're setting everything up. The messages continued, each one more cruel than the last, detailing their plans to systematically humiliate and hurt an 8-year-old child. His child, and Hannah, his wife, Sophie's mother, was not only complicit but actively participating. Raymond set down his phone with careful precision, his hands steady now despite the rage building in his chest. He'd spent years in courtrooms, learning to control his emotions, to channel anger into strategy. This moment required every ounce of that training. He saved the entire chat thread to his personal cloud storage, took screenshots, and documented everything with the methodical precision of someone building a case. Because that's exactly what he was doing. These people had made a critical error. They'd underestimated him, dismissed him as weak and desperate to please. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Raymond White had built his reputation on winning impossible custody cases. He specialized in protecting children from toxic family environments, fighting against wealthy opponents who thought money could buy outcomes. He'd seen every dirty trick, every manipulation tactic, every attempt to harm children caught in the middle of adult warfare. And he'd never lost a case when the child's welfare was genuinely at stake. Now he was going to use every skill, every connection, every ruthless strategy he'd ever employed, not in a courtroom, but in real life. The Hawkins family wanted to play games with his daughter's Christmas. He'd make sure they never forgot the consequences. But first, he needed to understand the full scope of their plan and his wife's involvement. Raymond spent the next hour going through Hannah's cloud storage, which had synced to his phone when she'd signed into their shared family account months ago and forgotten to sign out. What he found painted a picture of betrayal that went deeper than he'd imagined. There were messages between Hannah and her mother dating back 2 years, discussing how Sophie was too much like Raymond, weak and needy. Plans to gradually push Raymond out of family events, to make him feel unwelcome, to eventually convince Hannah to divorce him and marry someone from our own circle. Financial documents showing that Gertrude had been pressuring Hannah to try to gain sole custody, promising to pay for the best lawyers with money Raymond suspected they didn't actually have. But most damning were Hannah's private messages to Tony, sent just 3 days ago. I don't even like being around her anymore. She's so clingy and boring. Sometimes I wish I'd never had her. Christmas will be the perfect time to show her that she can't always get what she wants. Maybe it'll toughen her up. God knows Raymond's too soft to do it. Raymond closed his eyes and took a slow breath. The woman he'd married, the woman he'd loved, didn't exist anymore if she ever had. And she was actively plotting to emotionally destroy their daughter. He checked the time, 4:47 p.m. Sophie would be home from her after-school art program in 43 minutes. Hannah wouldn't be back from her ladies' lunch until evening. He had time to think, to plan. The attorney in him knew what he needed to do: legally document everything, secure evidence, prepare for divorce and a custody battle. The father in him wanted to protect Sophie immediately, to grab her and run, to never let the Hawkins family near her again. But the part of him that had been quietly building for years, the part that was tired of being dismissed and disrespected, wanted something more. Revenge, not petty, not simple, but thorough and devastating. He wanted the Hawkins family to feel every ounce of humiliation they'd planned for Sophie. He wanted them exposed, ruined, destroyed in a way that would ensure they never hurt another child again. And Raymond White knew exactly how to make it happen. Over the next 3 days, Raymond moved through his life like a ghost, playing the role of oblivious husband and father while methodically executing a plan that would have impressed a military strategist. He went to work, came home, made dinner, read Sophie bedtime stories, all while gathering information, making calls, and setting pieces on a chessboard that the Hawkins family didn't even know existed. His first call was to Lloyd Harrington, a former client turned friend who owned a small but sophisticated security company. Raymond had won Lloyd full custody of his son 3 years ago after his ex-wife's family had attempted something similar, a coordinated campaign to alienate the child from his father. Lloyd owed Raymond everything, and he made that clear when Raymond explained what he needed. Hidden cameras and audio equipment, Raymond said quietly, speaking from his car in a grocery store parking lot. I need the Hawkins estate wired before Christmas Day. Every common room, every hallway where they might congregate. I need crystal clear audio and video. That's potentially illegal without consent, Lloyd said carefully. Connecticut is a one-party consent state for recording, Raymond replied. I'll be present at the event, and I'll be a party to every conversation. It's perfectly legal as long as I'm there and I'm part of the interaction. Besides, I'm not planning to use it in court, not directly, anyway. What are you planning? To show them who they're really dealing with. Can you do it? Lloyd was quiet for a moment. For you? For Sophie? I'll do it personally. Give me the details. Raymond's second call was to Daryl Briggs, a private investigator who'd worked with him on dozens of cases. Daryl specialized in finding financial irregularities, hidden assets, and uncomfortable truths that people preferred to keep buried. I need everything you can find on the Hawkins family, Raymond said. Financial records, tax returns, business dealings, debts, lawsuits, everything. I need to know where they're vulnerable, what they're hiding, and what leverage I can use. This sounds personal, Daryl noted. It is, and I need it fast. I have 6 days. Consider it done. And Raymond, whatever they did to make you come to me like this, I hope you make them regret it. The third piece of his plan required more delicacy. Raymond called his senior partner at the firm, Cecil Cole, a 62-year-old attorney who'd been practicing family law for 40 years. Cecil had mentored Raymond, taught him everything about protecting children from toxic family dynamics, and had a particular hatred for wealthy families who thought their money made them untouchable. Cecil, I need to take personal leave after Christmas, Raymond said, and I need your advice on something sensitive. They met at Cecil's home that evening, an elegant brownstone in downtown Hartford. Over whiskey in Cecil's study, Raymond laid out everything: the messages, the plan, the betrayal. Cecil's face darkened as he listened. And what are you planning to do? Cecil asked when Raymond finished. I'm going to let them execute their plan, Raymond said. I'm going to walk into that house on Christmas Day with Sophie, and I'm going to let them try to humiliate her in front of everyone. But I'm going to make sure the right people are watching. I'm going to expose them so thoroughly that they'll never recover. Cecil studied him for a long moment. You know, I have to advise caution. As your partner and your friend, I know. But as someone who's seen too many children damaged by people like the Hawkins family. Cecil opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a business card. This is my wife's cousin. She's a producer for a regional news station. If you're going to expose them, you might as well make sure it reaches the right audience. Eleanor's been looking for a story about wealthy families abusing their privilege. Raymond took the card. Cecil, you didn't get this from me. Cecil interrupted. And if anyone asks, I advise you to pursue only legal channels. But Raymond, destroy them completely. By December 22nd, Raymond had assembled a complete picture of the Hawkins family's vulnerabilities, and it was even worse than he'd suspected. Daryl's investigation revealed that Milton and Gertrude were drowning in debt, having mortgaged the family estate twice over to maintain their lifestyle. They owed money to everyone from credit card companies to private lenders, some with connections to less than legal operations. Brian had been involved in a business deal that bordered on fraud, and only the family's lawyers had kept him out of prison. Tony had been quietly embezzling from a charity she ran, skimming donations into a personal account. And Hannah? Hannah had been having an affair with a country club tennis instructor named Travis Howe, funded by cash advances on credit cards that Raymond had no knowledge of. She'd racked up nearly $40,000 in debt, all while planning to divorce Raymond and blame him for financial irresponsibility. It was a house of cards built on lies, debts, and cruelty, and Raymond was going to bring it crashing down. But first, he had to protect Sophie. On December 23rd, he took her to breakfast at her favorite diner, just the two of them. She'd been quiet lately, sensing the tension in the house, even if she couldn't name it. "Dad, is Mom mad at me?" Sophie asked, pushing her pancakes around her plate. Raymond's heart broke. "Why would you think that, sweetheart? She doesn't talk to me much anymore. And when we're at Grammy's house, everyone seems annoyed when I'm there." He reached across the table and took her small hand in his. "Sophie, listen to me very carefully. None of that is your fault. You are amazing exactly as you are. You're kind, talented, smart, and so full of love. If people can't see that, it's their problem, not yours. But nothing. I need you to trust me about something, okay? Christmas might be a little strange this year. There might be some uncomfortable moments, but I need you to know that I'm going to be right there with you. And I'm never going to let anyone hurt you. Do you understand?" Sophie looked at him with wide eyes. "Are you and Mom getting divorced?" The question hit him like a physical blow, but he recovered quickly. His daughter was smart, of course she'd sensed it. "I don't know what's going to happen with Mom and me," he said honestly. "But I do know that no matter what, you and I are a team, always. And I'm going to make sure you're safe and loved and protected. That's a promise." She nodded slowly, then squeezed his hand. "I love you, Dad. I love you too, Sophie. More than anything in the world." That night, while Hannah was out with Tony shopping for last-minute gifts, Lloyd Harrington came to the house. He was dressed as a cable repair technician, complete with a van parked in the driveway. Raymond had called in a fake service complaint earlier that day. "The Hawkins place is done," Lloyd said quietly as he pretended to examine their cable box. "I installed 6 cameras and 8 audio pickups. Everything's on a closed network that feeds directly to a server I control. They'll never know they're being recorded. And the wireless transmission? Set up and tested. Everything that happens on Christmas Day will be recorded and broadcast live to 3 separate secure locations. I've also set up a system where you can live stream it directly to specific recipients if needed." Raymond nodded. "Thank you, Lloyd. I know this is risky for you." "You saved my son," Lloyd said simply. "This is nothing compared to what you did for us. Besides, someone needs to protect kids like Sophie from people like that. Might as well be us." On Christmas Eve, the tension in the White household was palpable. Hannah was on her phone constantly, texting with her family, her face lit by the cold glow of the screen. She barely looked at Sophie during dinner, didn't help with the bedtime routine, and went to bed early with a headache that Raymond suspected was fake. He sat in Sophie's room long after she fell asleep, watching her peaceful face in the dim glow of her nightlight. Tomorrow would change everything. Tomorrow, he would make sure that the people who wanted to hurt his daughter would face consequences they never saw coming. Raymond had spent his career fighting for children in courtrooms, using the law as his weapon. But the law was slow, imperfect, and often insufficient. Tomorrow, he would use a different kind of weapon, the truth, delivered in the most public and devastating way possible. He contacted Eleanor Watts, the news producer Cecil had recommended. She'd been immediately interested in the story, especially when Raymond explained that he had documented evidence of a wealthy family plotting to emotionally abuse a child. She'd assigned a crew to be on standby, ready to arrive at the Hawkins estate at his signal. He'd also reached out to several of the Hawkins family's business associates, investors, and social contacts carefully, anonymously, setting up a mass email that would go out at precisely 1 p.m. on Christmas Day. The email would contain excerpts from the group chat, financial documents showing their debts and fraudulent activities, and photos that Daryl had obtained of Hannah with Travis. But the centerpiece of his plan was something more personal, more immediate. Raymond had learned from years of custody battles that the most powerful evidence wasn't just documents or recordings. It was seeing someone's true nature exposed in real time, watching them reveal themselves to be exactly who you'd accuse them of being. The Hawkins family wanted to humiliate Sophie on Christmas. He'd give them the opportunity. He'd walk into that house with his daughter. He'd let them try to execute their cruel plan. And then, in front of everyone, he'd reveal that he'd known all along. He'd show them the recordings, the messages, the evidence of everything they were. He'd let them see their own cruelty reflected back at them, undeniable and devastating. And then he'd make sure they faced consequences for it: legal, social, and financial. Raymond checked his watch. 11:47 p.m. In 13 hours, they'd be at the Hawkins estate. In 13 hours, he'd begin the systematic destruction of everyone who'd planned to hurt his daughter. He kissed Sophie's forehead gently and whispered, "I promise you, sweetheart, after tomorrow, everything will be different." Christmas morning arrived with a blanket of fresh snow, the kind that made everything look pristine and peaceful, a sharp contrast to the war Raymond was preparing to wage. Sophie woke early, excited despite her recent anxiety about her mother's family. She still had the hopeful innocence of a child who wanted to believe that people were fundamentally good, that her grandmother and grandfather and aunts and uncle loved her. Raymond hated that he was about to shatter that innocence. But better a quick, clean break than years of slow poison. They opened presents at home, first Raymond's gifts to Sophie, thoughtfully chosen and lovingly wrapped. The art set she'd wanted, with professional-grade supplies that he'd researched for weeks, a telescope for her growing interest in astronomy, books about artists and scientists, encouraging her curious mind. She squealed with delight at each one, her face glowing with happiness. Hannah watched from the couch, barely participating, her expression a mixture of impatience and vague disgust. She'd given Sophie a single gift, a sweater 3 sizes too large in a color Sophie hated. "You'll grow into it," she'd said dismissively when Sophie had tried to smile and say thank you. "Ready to go to Grammy and Grampy's?" Hannah asked, checking her phone again. Raymond knew she was confirming details with her family, making sure their cruel plan was still in motion. "Ready," Raymond said, meeting her eyes. She looked away first. They drove through the snow-covered streets of Greenwich, Sophie chattering nervously in the backseat about whether Grammy would like the drawing she'd made for her. Raymond caught her eyes in the rearview mirror and smiled, trying to project confidence and security even as his heart ached for what was coming. The Hawkins estate was a sprawling colonial that had been in the family for 4 generations, all white columns and black shutters, surrounded by 3 acres of immaculately maintained grounds. Today, it looked like something from a Christmas card, decorated with tasteful white lights and evergreen wreaths. Beautiful on the outside, rotten within a perfect metaphor. Raymond had timed their arrival for exactly noon. He confirmed with Lloyd that all recording equipment was functional. He texted Eleanor Watts, who had a news crew parked 2 streets away, ready to move at his signal. He'd sent a preview message to Cecil, who was standing by with divorce papers already drawn up. Everything was in place. They walked up the front steps together, Sophie holding a wrapped present for her grandparents, still hopeful. Raymond carried a bottle of expensive wine that he had no intention of sharing with these people. Hannah walked ahead, eager to get inside, eager to be part of the family that was about to traumatize her daughter. Gertrude answered the door, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, wearing a red cashmere dress that probably cost more than Raymond's monthly mortgage payment. Her smile was warm and welcoming, the kind of smile that would have fooled anyone who didn't know what she was planning. "Merry Christmas," she said, pulling Sophie into a hug that the little girl accepted eagerly. "We're so glad you're here. Come in, come in." The house was warm and beautifully decorated, the smell of turkey and cinnamon filling the air. A massive Christmas tree dominated the living room, surrounded by presents wrapped in coordinated paper. Raymond counted at least 6 large boxes with Sophie's name on them, arranged prominently. His jaw tightened. Milton appeared from the study, drink in hand, playing the part of the jovial grandfather. "There's my girl. Come here and give Grampy a hug." Sophie ran to him, and he patted her head absently before turning his attention to Raymond. "Raymond, good of you to come. Wouldn't miss it," Raymond said evenly. Tony and Brian were already there, sprawled on the furniture like they owned the place, which technically they still did, though not for much longer if Daryl's financial projections were correct. They greeted Sophie with exaggerated enthusiasm that made Raymond's skin crawl, knowing what they were really thinking. The first hour was almost normal, uncomfortable, but bearable. They ate appetizers, made small talk, avoided anything substantive. Sophie played quietly in the corner with some old toys from Hannah's childhood, clearly sensing that she wasn't really wanted in the adult conversation, but trying to be good. Raymond watched everyone carefully, noting the glances exchanged between Hannah and her mother, the smirks Tony and Brian shared when they thought he wasn't looking. They thought they were so clever, so subtle. They had no idea that every word, every gesture, every cruel look was being recorded in high definition. At 1 p.m., Gertrude clapped her hands together. "Well, I think it's time for presents. Sophie, darling, why don't you come over here by the tree? We have some special surprises for you." Sophie's face lit up, and she scrambled over to the tree. Raymond positioned himself carefully, making sure he had a clear view of everyone while staying close enough to Sophie to intervene if needed. He pulled out his phone, ostensibly to take pictures, but actually to activate the live stream to Eleanor's news crew and to start recording on his own device as backup. "Now, we have several presents for you," Gertrude said, her voice saccharine sweet. "Why don't you start with this big one?" She handed Sophie a large box, wrapped in silver paper with an elaborate bow. Sophie took it eagerly, her hands trembling slightly with excitement. "Thank you, Grammy. Open it," Tony urged, her phone out and recording. "We want to see your face." Sophie tore into the paper, revealing a plain cardboard box. She opened it, digging through tissue paper, and her face fell. Inside was nothing but crumpled newspapers and an old, broken doll with a cracked face and missing limbs. "What?" Sophie looked confused, looking up at Gertrude. "I don't understand." "Oh, did we get the wrong box?" Gertrude said, her tone mocking. "How silly of us. Try another one." Raymond felt his blood pressure rising, but forced himself to remain still. "Not yet." Sophie opened the next present. This one supposedly the art set she'd been talking about for months. Inside was a children's coloring book, the kind for toddlers, and a box of broken crayons. "Grammy, I think there's been a mistake," Sophie said, her voice small and confused. She was starting to understand that something was wrong, but couldn't quite comprehend that it was intentional. "Is there?" Gertrude said, looking at the others with barely concealed amusement. "Well, let's see what else Santa brought you." One by one, Sophie opened the presents, each reveal more devastating than the last. Empty boxes, cheap, broken toys, things that were clearly intended to mock her interests, a children's picture book about stars instead of the telescope book she'd wanted, a stick figure drawing pad when she'd been practicing more advanced art techniques. Raymond watched his daughter's face crumble, watched the moment when she realized this was deliberate. Tears began streaming down her cheeks, but she was trying so hard to be polite, to smile, to say thank you. "What's wrong, Sophie?" Brian asked, smirking. "Not happy with your presents?" I'm sorry, Sophie was crying openly now, looking to her mother for support. Hannah looked away, scrolling on her phone. "Perhaps this will teach you not to be so greedy and demanding," Milton said, his jovial grandfather mask slipping to reveal the cruelty beneath. "Children should be grateful for what they get, not always asking for more. I wasn't being greedy," Sophie sobbed. I thought. "You thought you were special," Tony said cruelly. "You thought we cared about your little drawings and your boring stories about school. But we don't. We really don't." Sophie looked at Raymond, her face destroyed, seeking protection and understanding. And this was the moment he'd been waiting for. The moment when they'd fully revealed themselves. When their cruelty was undeniable and recorded from multiple angles. Raymond set down his phone, still recording, and walked to Sophie. He knelt beside her and pulled her into his arms. "It's okay, sweetheart. I know. I've known all along." The room went quiet. Hannah looked up from her phone, her face confused. Gertrude's smile faltered. "What do you mean?" Milton asked. Raymond stood, keeping one protective arm around Sophie, and pulled his phone back out. I've known about your plan since December 18th. I've known every detail, every message, every cruel thing you said about my daughter." The color drained from Hannah's face. "Raymond, I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't," he said, his voice cold and hard. "Don't insult my intelligence any further than you already have." He held up his phone. "Your family iCloud synced to my phone. I've read every message in your Christmas planning group chat. Every disgusting word. You've been spying on us?" Gertrude sputtered, her composed facade cracking. "I've been documenting abuse," Raymond corrected. And before you think about trying to delete those messages or claim this is all a misunderstanding, you should know that I've had this entire day recorded. Audio and video. Crystal clear. From multiple angles. Including everything that just happened to Sophie. Brian stood up. That's illegal. You can't record people without consent. Connecticut is a one-party consent state. Raymond interrupted. I'm a party to this conversation, and I consented. Everything I've done is perfectly legal. Can you say the same about your business dealings, Brian? Or should we talk about the fraud investigation that your family's lawyers barely got you out of? Brian's face went red. You son of a... And Tony, Raymond continued, turning to Hannah's sister. Should we discuss the charity funds you've been embezzling? I have documentation of that too. Or how about you, Milton and Gertrude? Should we talk about the multiple mortgages on this house? The debts you've hidden from your business partners, the money you owe to people who don't take kindly to being stiffed. How dare you? Gertrude hissed. You come into our home. Your home? Raymond laughed, but there was no humor in it. This home that you're about to lose because you can't make payments? This home that's built on debt and lies and cruelty? He looked at each of them in turn. You wanted to humiliate an 8-year-old child to make yourselves feel powerful. You wanted to crush her spirit because she had the audacity to want love and attention from her family. Well, congratulations. You showed exactly who you are. And I made sure the whole world is going to see it. What do you mean, the whole world? Hannah asked, her voice shaking. Raymond checked his watch. Right about now, a mass email is going out to everyone in your social circle. Your business contacts, your country club, friends, everyone who matters to you. It contains excerpts from your planning messages, financial documents showing your debts and fraudulent activities, and some interesting photos of Hannah with Travis Howe, the tennis instructor she's been having an affair with. Hannah's mouth fell open. How did you? I'm a family law attorney, Hannah. I've spent 10 years learning how to find evidence and protect children from toxic family environments. Did you really think I wouldn't notice the credit card debt? The lies about where you were? The way you looked at our daughter like she was an inconvenience? He shook his head. I loved you. I tried so hard to make this marriage work, to give Sophie a stable family. But you chose them over her. Over us. So, now you get to face the consequences. There was a knock at the door, sharp, professional. Raymond had been counting on it. That'll be Eleanor Watts from Channel 8 News. I invited them to cover a story about a prominent Greenwich family emotionally abusing a child on Christmas. I'm sure they'll want statements from all of you. The room erupted. Gertrude shrieked about lawsuits. Milton started toward Raymond, but stopped when Raymond simply stood his ground, his eyes hard. Brian swore viciously. Tony started crying, not out of remorse, but out of panic about being caught. Hannah was frozen, her face a mask of horror and disbelief. You can't do this, Gertrude said, but her voice was shaking now. We'll fight you. We'll destroy you. With what money? Raymond asked calmly. With what reputation? By the end of today, everyone who matters to you will know exactly what you are. The country club will revoke your membership. Your business partners will cut ties. Your social circle will turn their backs on you. And Hannah, he turned to his wife. I've already had divorce papers drawn up. You'll be served tomorrow. I'm filing for full custody of Sophie, and I have more than enough evidence to ensure I get it. I'll be citing your emotional abuse, your affair, your complicity in this whole sick plan. Raymond, please, Hannah said, and for the first time, there was real fear in her eyes. We can work this out. I'll change. No, he said simply. You had years to change. You had years to be a mother to our daughter. You chose this family's cruelty over her well-being every single time. So now you get to live with that choice. The doorbell rang again, more insistent. Through the window, Raymond could see news vans pulling up. He'd given Eleanor the green light, and she'd moved fast. Raymond picked Sophie up. She was clinging to him, still crying, but starting to understand that her father had protected her, had known all along, had been on her side the whole time. We're leaving now, he said. Sophie will never spend another moment with any of you. You'll never get the chance to hurt her again. You can't just take her, Hannah shouted. Watch me, Raymond said. And if you try to fight me on this, I'll make sure every single piece of evidence I have becomes public record in the custody hearing. I'll air every dirty secret, every lie, every cruel thing you've said and done. I'll destroy what's left of your family's reputation so thoroughly that your name will be synonymous with child abuse in this state." He walked toward the door, Sophie clutching him tightly. As he passed Hannah, she reached out, whether to stop him or to touch their daughter one last time. He didn't know. He didn't care. "Goodbye, Hannah," he said. "Merry Christmas." He opened the door to find Eleanor Watts and her news crew on the front step, cameras already rolling. The flashes went off as Raymond carried Sophie past them to his car, carefully shielding her face from the cameras. He'd given Eleanor permission to film the house and the family's reactions, but he'd made it clear that Sophie was off limits. This was about protecting her, not exploiting her pain. As Raymond buckled Sophie into the car seat and pulled away from the Hawkins estate, he could hear the chaos erupting behind them. Gertrude screaming at the news crew, Milton trying to physically block the cameras, Tony and Brian arguing about what to do, and Hannah standing in the doorway, finally realizing the magnitude of what she'd lost. Sophie was quiet in the back seat, exhausted from crying. "Dad," she said softly. "Yeah, sweetheart? You knew the whole time?" "I did. Why did you let them do it? Why didn't you just keep me away?" Raymond pulled over, put the car in park, and turned to look at his daughter. "Because, Sophie, some people only show their true nature when they think no one's watching or when they think there won't be consequences. I needed to prove to the courts, to the world, but most importantly to you that this wasn't your fault, that you weren't being too sensitive or asking for too much, that they really were cruel, and you deserved better." She thought about this for a moment. "Is Mom going to be in trouble?" "Yes," he said honestly. "A lot of trouble." "Good," Sophie said, and there was a fierceness in her voice that Raymond had never heard before. "She was mean to me. They were all mean. I know, baby. I know. But I promise you, they're never going to hurt you again." They drove home in silence, the snow falling softly around them. Raymond's phone was exploding with calls and messages from Cecil, from Lloyd, from Eleanor, from reporters who'd already gotten wind of the story. But he ignored all of it. Right now, the only person who mattered was the little girl in his backseat. The fallout from Christmas Day was swift and devastating, exactly as Raymond had planned. By the evening of December 25th, the story was spreading across social media and local news outlets. "Wealthy Greenwich family caught planning to humiliate child on Christmas" was trending on regional news sites. The video footage from the Hawkins estate, carefully edited to protect Sophie's identity, but damning in its clarity, showed the family's cruelty in excruciating detail. Raymond had spent the evening with Sophie, ordering her favorite pizza, watching movies, and slowly helping her process what had happened. She was resilient, more resilient than he'd dared to hope, but she was also hurt and confused. He'd already scheduled an appointment with a child psychologist for the following week, determined to make sure she had professional support through this transition. That night, after Sophie was finally asleep, Raymond sat in his study and began to coordinate the final phases of his plan. The mass email he'd sent out earlier had done its work. His phone was full of responses from people who'd received it: shock, disgust, and in some cases, grim satisfaction. The Hawkins family had made enemies over the years with their arrogance and condescension, and those enemies were now circling like sharks scenting blood. Daryl Briggs called just after 10 p.m. "Raymond, you beautiful bastard. I've been watching the news, but I've got more information you need to hear. Go ahead." Milton Hawkins just had his accounts frozen. Turns out some of those private lenders I mentioned, they were connected to organized crime. When your email went out with evidence of his debts and his inability to pay, they moved fast. He's in serious danger, not just financially, but physically. Raymond felt a cold satisfaction. And the others? Brian's business partner filed a lawsuit this afternoon, claiming fraud. The evidence you provided gave him everything he needed. Brian's looking at serious legal trouble, possibly prison time. Tony's charity work is under investigation by the State Attorney General's office. Your documentation of her embezzlement triggered an automatic review. And Gertrude? Daryl laughed, but it was dark. The country club revoked the family membership. For someone like her, that's a social death sentence. She'll be a pariah. Good, Raymond said simply. And Hannah? I did some more digging on Travis Howe, the tennis instructor. Turns out she's not his first affair with a married client. His reputation at the country club is not great. When your evidence went public, the club fired him. Hannah's affair is now public knowledge, and from what I'm hearing, she's not handling it well. Raymond closed his eyes. He'd loved Hannah once. Or at least he'd loved who he thought she was. There was no satisfaction in her pain, only grim necessity. What about custody? Cecil already filed the emergency motion. With your evidence, I'd be shocked if Hannah gets anything more than supervised visitation, and even that might be off the table. The judge assigned to your case is Margaret Flynn. She's known for prioritizing children's welfare above all else. Your documentation of Hannah's participation in the Christmas plan, combined with evidence of her affair and emotional neglect, makes this an open and shut case. The next morning, December 26th, Raymond took Sophie to breakfast at the same diner they'd visited days earlier. She was subdued but seemed stronger somehow, as if the worst had already happened and she'd survived it. "Are we going to be okay?" she asked, picking at her pancakes. "We're going to be better than okay," Raymond promised. "It might be strange for a while. There will be some changes. But you and me, we're going to be just fine. Will I have to see Mom again?" The question hurt, but he understood it. "Maybe, eventually, in a controlled setting where I'm there to make sure you're safe. But only if you want to. No one's going to force you to be around people who hurt you." Sophie nodded slowly. "I don't want to see any of them again. Not Mom, not Grammy, not any of them. That's completely okay. That's your choice, and I'll make sure it's respected." Later that afternoon, Raymond met with Cecil at the firm. His mentor looked exhausted, but grimly satisfied. "I've been practicing law for 40 years, Cecil said, "and I've never seen anyone execute a plan like that. It was surgical, Raymond. Brutal, but surgical. They were going to destroy my daughter's Christmas to teach her a lesson about humility," Raymond said. "I wanted to make sure they learned a lesson instead." "Oh, they learned it," Cecil confirmed. "The judge signed off on your emergency custody order. Sophie is legally under your sole care until the full hearing, which is scheduled for January 15th. Based on the evidence, I expect you'll be granted full physical and legal custody with, at most, supervised visitation for Hannah." "What about the divorce?" "Hannah was served this morning. Her lawyer already called, asking if we consider mediation. I think she knows how badly she's screwed herself. The prenup you had her sign protects your assets, and with evidence of her affair and emotional abuse, she's not going to get a favorable settlement." Raymond nodded. "I don't want to drag this out longer than necessary. Offer her a minimal settlement enough to survive on, but nothing generous in exchange for her agreeing to the custody arrangement and waiving her rights to contest it. Tell her if she fights me, I'll make sure every detail of her behavior becomes public record. Consider it done." Cecil leaned back in his chair. "What about the Hawkins family? Are you satisfied with the damage, or are you planning more?" "I'm done with them," Raymond said. "The consequences they're facing now are their own doing. I just made sure those consequences arrived faster and more publicly than they would have otherwise. The debts, the fraud, the embezzlement, that was all them. I just exposed it." "Fair enough." Cecil studied him carefully. "How are you doing? This kind of thing, even when justified, takes a toll." Raymond thought about it. "I'm angry. I'm sad for what Sophie went through, for what Hannah became, for the years I wasted trying to make a broken family work. But I'm also relieved. Sophie and I can move forward now without the constant weight of that toxicity." "That's healthy," Cecil said. "But make sure you actually process the anger and the sadness. Don't just push it down." "I won't. I have an appointment with a therapist next week, same one I'm sending Sophie to. We're both going to need help working through this." Over the next 2 weeks, the story continued to evolve. Channel 8 News ran a follow-up piece about wealthy families and child abuse, using the Hawkins case as a centerpiece example without naming Sophie. The state attorney general's office announced a formal investigation into Tony's charity embezzlement. Brian was indicted on fraud charges. Milton and Gertrude were forced to sell the estate at a loss to pay their debts, and rumors suggested they were moving to a modest apartment in a less prestigious part of town. Hannah moved in with Tony temporarily, both of them effectively exiled from their former social circle. Travis Howe left the state entirely, reportedly fleeing multiple angry husbands and at least one lawsuit. Raymond watched it all with detached interest, more focused on Sophie's recovery than on the continuing downfall of the Hawkins family. His daughter was doing better than he'd hoped. The therapy was helping, and she'd started drawing again, filling pages with bright, hopeful images, instead of the darker themes that had been appearing in her work over the past year. He'd also made changes to their daily life, subtle ones that removed every reminder of Hannah and her family. They redecorated Sophie's room together, choosing colors and themes she loved. He adjusted his work schedule to be more present, taking on fewer cases so he could be there for school pickups and bedtime routines. They established new traditions: Friday night pizza and movies, Saturday morning art time, Sunday adventures to museums or parks. Sophie was blossoming in the absence of constant criticism and emotional manipulation. She laughed more, talked more, shared her thoughts and feelings without fear of judgment. Raymond saw glimpses of who she could become without the Hawkins family's poison in her life: confident, creative, joyful. On January 10th, 5 days before the custody hearing, Hannah called Raymond's cell. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Raymond," her voice was small, defeated. "Can we talk?" "About what?" "About everything. About Sophie. About the divorce. About what I did." He was quiet for a moment. "What do you want, Hannah?" "I want to apologize. I want to explain. There's no explanation that makes what you did okay." "I know." She was crying now. "I know. I was horrible. I was caught up in my family's toxicity, and I let it poison me. I let it poison the way I treated you and Sophie. And I'm so sorry." Raymond felt nothing. No anger, no sympathy, just a vast emptiness where his love for her used to be. "I appreciate the apology, but it doesn't change anything." "I know," she whispered. I wanted you to know that I regret it. Every day, I see now what I lost, what I threw away. I see what my family really is. And I hate that I became like them." "Then change," Raymond said. "Get therapy. Cut ties with your family if that's what it takes to become a better person. But do it for yourself, not for me or Sophie. Because that door is closed, Hannah, forever." Can I at least see her? Supervised visits? I know I don't deserve it, but that's up to Sophie." Raymond interrupted. "If she wants to see you, we'll arrange it. But I'm not going to force her or pressure her. She's been through enough." "Okay," Hannah said. "That's fair. That's more than fair. Hannah, for what it's worth, I'm sorry it came to this. I tried to make our marriage work. But you chose your family over ours too many times, and Sophie paid the price. I couldn't let that continue." "I understand," she said. "And Raymond, thank you for protecting her when I didn't. You're a better parent than I ever was." She hung up before he could respond. The custody hearing on January 15th was anticlimactic. Hannah appeared with her lawyer, looking haggard and defeated. She didn't contest Raymond's petition for full custody. The judge reviewed the evidence, the messages, the video recordings, the documentation of emotional abuse, and her face grew progressively harder. "Mrs. White," Judge Flynn said, "I've been hearing family law cases for 23 years, and I have rarely seen such a clear-cut case of emotional abuse and parental negligence. Your participation in a plan to deliberately humiliate your 8-year-old daughter on Christmas is unconscionable." Hannah kept her eyes down, saying nothing. "However," the judge continued, "I also note that you voluntarily entered therapy and have not contested this custody arrangement. I'm therefore granting Mr. White full physical and legal custody of Sophie White. You will be allowed supervised visitation every other Saturday for 2 hours, contingent on Sophie's willingness to participate and on you continuing therapy. These visits will be supervised by a court-appointed monitor. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Hannah said quietly. "Furthermore, I'm ordering you to have no contact with the child outside of these scheduled, supervised visits. No calls, no texts, no showing up at her school. Any violation will result in a restraining order. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Mr. White, you have full authority to make all decisions regarding Sophie's welfare, education, medical care, and living arrangements. I'll see you both back here in 6 months to review the situation." The gavel came down, and it was done. Raymond walked out of the courthouse with sole custody of his daughter, with legal protections in place, with the validation that everything he'd done was justified and necessary. That evening, he sat Sophie down and explained what had happened in simple terms. "The judge agreed that you should live with me, and that you don't have to see anyone you don't want to see. Mom can visit sometimes if you want, but only if you want. Do I have to decide now? Sophie asked. No, sweetheart. You can decide later. Or never. It's completely up to you. She nodded, processing this. Dad? Yeah? I'm glad it's just us now. He pulled her into a hug, blinking back tears. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. The divorce was finalized 3 weeks later. Hannah received a minimal settlement enough to start over, but nothing extravagant. She'd signed away all claims to their home, their savings, and most of their shared assets in exchange for Raymond agreeing not to pursue her for his legal fees. The Hawkins family continued their downward spiral, though Raymond stopped following the details. He heard through mutual acquaintances that Milton had suffered a heart attack from the stress, that Gertrude was living in near poverty, that Brian was awaiting trial, and that Tony had fled the state to avoid her own legal troubles. But their fates no longer mattered to him. They'd been removed from his and Sophie's life, and that was enough. By March, 3 months after the Christmas incident, Raymond and Sophie had established a new normal. Their home was peaceful, filled with Sophie's artwork and laughter. She'd made new friends at school, unburdened by the constant anxiety that had marked her interactions before. Her teacher reported that she was flourishing academically and socially. Raymond had even started dating again cautiously, not looking for anything serious, but open to the possibility of future happiness. He'd learned from his experience with Hannah about the warning signs of toxic family dynamics, about the importance of choosing a partner who prioritized their children above all else. One evening in late March, as they were cleaning up after dinner, Sophie said, "Dad, I've been thinking." "About what, sweetheart?" "About Mom. I think maybe I want to see her. Just once. Just to see if she's really changed." Raymond felt a twist of protective instinct, but forced himself to remain calm. "Okay, we can arrange that. But remember, the visits are supervised, and if at any point you feel uncomfortable, you can leave. You're in control." "I know," Sophie said. I think I need to see her. To know." The visit happened the following Saturday at a neutral location, a family therapy center with comfortable rooms designed to feel less institutional. Raymond waited in an adjacent room with a window that allowed him to watch while giving Sophie and Hannah privacy. Hannah looked different, thinner, her expensive clothes replaced with simple jeans and a sweater. Her hair was pulled back in a plain ponytail, her face free of the heavy makeup she used to wear. She looked, Raymond thought, more real than she had in years. Sophie approached cautiously, and Hannah knelt down to her level. Raymond couldn't hear the conversation through the glass, but he could see Hannah talking, tears streaming down her face, Sophie listening with a serious expression. The supervised monitor sat nearby, ready to intervene if needed. After 30 minutes, Sophie stood and walked to the door. Hannah reached out as if to hug her, then stopped, respecting boundaries. Sophie paused, turned back, and gave her mother a quick hug before leaving. In the car on the way home, Raymond asked, "How was it?" She said she was sorry. She said she knows she was a bad mom and that she's trying to be better. "Do you believe her?" Sophie thought about this. "I don't know. Maybe. But I also don't care as much as I thought I would. She's not really my mom anymore. Not the way you're my dad. You're the one who protected me. You're the one who's always there." Raymond's vision blurred with tears. "I always will be, Sophie. Always." "I know," she said simply. "That's why I'm not scared anymore." As spring turned to summer, Raymond found himself reflecting on everything that had happened. The Christmas incident, as they'd come to call it, had been a turning point not just in their lives, but in how he understood his role as a father and as a person. He'd spent years trying to be accommodating, trying to make peace, trying to believe that patience and kindness would eventually win people over. And with most people, that was still his approach. But he'd learned that some people like the Hawkins family mistook kindness for weakness. They saw patience as permission to continue hurting others. With people like that, Raymond had learned, the only effective response was swift, decisive action. Not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. Not for revenge, but for protection. He destroyed the Hawkins family's reputation, exposed their crimes, and ensured they faced consequences for their actions. Some might call it excessive, but Raymond slept well at night knowing that Sophie was safe, that she'd never again be subjected to their cruelty, and that they'd never have the opportunity to hurt another child the way they'd planned to hurt his daughter. That summer, Raymond and Sophie took a trip to California just the two of them, exploring beaches and museums and everything Sophie wanted to see. She was happy, truly happy, in a way he hadn't seen in years. She talked about her future, about becoming an artist or a scientist, about all the possibilities ahead of her. On their last night in California, as they watched the sunset over the Pacific Ocean, Sophie said, "Dad, I'm glad you're my dad." "I'm glad I'm your dad too," Raymond said, pulling her close. "And I'm glad you stood up for me, even though it was scary. You're worth standing up for, sweetheart. You're worth everything." She smiled and rested her head against his shoulder. "I know. You taught me that." And in that moment, watching the sun set with his daughter beside him, Raymond White felt something he hadn't felt in years. Complete peace. He'd fought for what mattered. He'd protected the person he loved most. He'd made sure that cruelty had consequences and that his daughter truly knew that she was valued and loved and worth defending. The Hawkins family had wanted to teach Sophie a lesson about knowing her place. Instead, Raymond had taught them a lesson they'd never forget. That when you threaten a child, when you plan to break their spirit for your own entertainment, you'll face someone willing to use every weapon at their disposal to ensure you pay for it. Not all battles are fought in courtrooms. Some are fought on Christmas Day in a Connecticut estate, with cameras rolling and consequences waiting. And Raymond White had won that battle decisively, earning not just victory, but his daughter's safety, happiness, and future. As they drove home from California, Sophie asleep in the passenger seat, Raymond thought about the future. There would be challenges ahead. There always were. But they'd face them together, father and daughter, a team forged in the fire of one terrible Christmas and strengthened by the knowledge that they'd survived it. The Hawkins family had wanted to ruin Sophie's Christmas. Instead, they'd ruined their own lives while Raymond rebuilt his and Sophie's into something stronger and better than before. And that, Raymond thought with satisfaction, was the best revenge of all. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.